working? It's working! Yes, it works! Hey, I'm Robert Pearson, this is Follow the Leader. And I got the, I don't remember if I mentioned this one yet. I went to a men's conference. I don't normally do this, but I went to a men's, I go to men's conferences normally. It's all about the drive out there and the fellowship. It's the best. And occasionally the speakers will strike on a chord with me. And this last time, a gentleman by the name of John Bevere did. And he said a lot of the same things that I've been concerned with personally, and actually just wrote a book about some of them. They're like ancillary chapters in his book. And I don't know if he's made the point in his book yet that I've read. I've only read the first couple chapters. But anyway, I purchased his book and began reading it. Because I don't normally get the teaching materials of any of the speakers, usually. But he said the two main things he did that impressed me were his main point that your calling isn't, it's not just church work that is important to God. You can serve God as a construction worker, as a whatever. His only examples were high-profile businessmen, but that's a beef I'll take up another time. And but I just wrote a book about this, about how the messaging to blue collar from evangelical media heads needs to be more blue collar in their communication and in their messaging. It needs to be important and intentionally expressed, the importance of man's work and anyone's work. Any job you're doing right now, you're there because God has called you to it, even if it's a lousy job only for a season. And it's important. And it's a part of, you're participating in creation with God, even if you're just cleaning up the parking lot at Walmart. Some of those buggies get left there by moms who are there with their kids, and they don't want to leave their kids alone in the car, and they just leave the buggy wherever. Somebody's got to return that car to the store so, the next person can have groceries carried around. That's an important thing to do. You're serving others that way. And it's every bit as important as a pastor. And so he made that point, and then he also, the logical expression of that was that there is no secular divide. Secular doesn't exist. It's all sacred. As Christians, we are a royal priesthood. And so everything that any Christian does is effectively service work in the temple. They are, it should be our goal to sort of, sanctify where we go. He didn't use this exact phrasing in the book or in his talk, but that he said there is no secular. And made the point that it's not just the guy standing up there preaching. Those are his gift and his calling are simply more obvious. And other people's are less obvious. Which is fascinating. So I picked up his book, and I actually, there was like a special deal. I don't know if they're still running it, but the launch team, yeah, it's still showing backwards. I don't understand the internet. Why is it mirrored in the phone camera? Anyway, so his book is called X, Multiply Your God-Given Potential, right? And the other thing he did was he gave a definition of faith I had never heard before. In 5 years of Bible college, a lifetime of sermons. And it's that faith is multiplication. Which is a little interesting. And then the moment, I was like, okay, preacher man, show me what you got. And then he said, he mentioned, he references Matthew and starts talking about the parable of the talents. And I was like, you win. You have won. You've officially won just now. Good job. Because in that parable, the only thing the stewards do is multiply what they were given. Okay? When Jesus is telling the story and the master comes to them after his long journey, after they've multiplied what they were given, he says, well done. You have executed shrewd business acumen. No. well done. You played the stock market. No. He says, well done, you have been faithful. So being faithful implies some kind of return or some kind of gain on your talents and skills and abilities within your calling. So faith is one of the definitions of faith could be multiplication. I would argue it's a fruit of faithful conduct, but that's splitting hairs. The point is, faith equals multiplication, and it's also not quite as like mysterious. Like it's a definition of faith, math. So I was like, all right, that checks out. Good job, man. I'm surprised. That was an excellent application for ministry and life and jobs, work, man stuff. And so, whoa, everybody's just stopping dead in the middle of traffic for no reason. All right. So I was like, all right, fine. I'll pick your book up and read it because that's awesome. And it was a launch team deal. So his book, actually, this book, X, Multiply Your God-Given Potential, it's branding when you just say the whole name over again. It's got a cool cover. It's just flat black with like a rainbow X on it. It looks cool. Anyway, something break in my... Sorry, I got a work truck, and I don't know if that quick stop just rattled some stuff loose inside the back there. Well, nothing's falling out on the road behind me. I guess we're okay. The guy behind me's got some cautious following distance. Hopefully nothing's waving around in the air. I don't see anything flapping in the wind or dragging on the ground. I guess we're good. Anyway, yeah. Book. X. God-Given Potential. Awesomeness. So, yeah, I picked it up. I'm part of the launch team or whatever. So the book is on pre-order right now. Basically, the launch team is you pre-ordered 3 books. You get a little, like, deck of cards. Oh, the box came fragmented slightly. I think I got the box of cards that was on the bottom of the box of cards. Because the sides had split up when I got it. So the little cards, branding, right? It's all the same thing. And they got fun little aphorisms on them. Is that the right word? Metaphors, slogans, axioms. But basically, it's little things that are in the book. That's backwards because this camera's dumb. So yeah, I jump on Periscope every day, and I'll just basically read through and just kind of talk about put that in here so we don't lose it. Talk about the idea that's on the card. This one is, God's your creator's your father, desires your success in the labor he's called you to, right? So God wants us to succeed, specifically where he's called us to be. So when we're not where he's called us to be, he will quietly watch us fail and allow us to figure it out on our own. God likes to give us space and mess things up on our own. And then he's always right there when we go, hey, can you help me with this? And he's like, yeah, certainly. Why don't you come over here and do it my way? It's awesome. Anyway, so yeah, Periscope. I'm all the places. And then I repost this stuff on YouTube. So I'm reading through the book, and I'm just going to be on here talking about the different chapters of the book as I go through them. So I got chapters 1 and 2 down in the last couple days. So chapter 1, Connecting the Dots, is essentially talking about calling, and that you're called to, if you look at your calling to just what are you doing right now, that God is allowed to succeed and take root in your life, and see that as a calling, and just try to be really great at it. And then chapter 2 is about gifting, and I forget what it's called now. But the point of it is he focuses on gifts in the terms of the Greek word charisma, the Greek word for grace being charis, and then it gets that little suffix on the end, charisma, and it becomes a giftful grace, or a gift that has been generously bestowed. If you're reading the NIV, it'll be the word translated as free gift in certain passages of Scripture and in Paul's letters and stuff. But the way he looks at it, grace is something God gives you, right? So a gifting is a more tangible something that God gave you. And so he just says, hey, let's look at what you're good at. And it doesn't have to be anything grand like public speaking or something, but he uses himself as an example. As a public speaker and author, he kind of shows how writing is a gifting, is a grace given to him by God, and then his speaking talent. And he gives examples where he failed miserably and examples where he succeeded powerfully. And the only difference between the times when he stunk and the times when he was awesome is that he was doing it in God's strength in the times that he was succeeding. I gave you a shot, buddy. I hate when people have their blinker on and then just sit there and hold up traffic. And then you give up, you're like, oh, I'll give this guy a break. And then you just stop, and then he just starts driving forward again without turning his blinker off. It's the best. Anyway, so he uses the word charisma as gift, and he jumps over to Romans 12, right? He did not jump like disconnected, but he, in the flow of thought through the book, I jumped into the second chapter. So first chapter, the first thing he does is he makes it clear that your calling in a large part is where you're at, or what God has allowed to succeed and take root in your life. His example is like a high-profile businessman who's a very successful businessman says, you know, my family has all they need, I've succeeded, I've made it, why should I keep working so hard? And his answer was, I've written a lot of books, I fly all over the country, my family's taken care of, I've made it, why should I keep speaking? And the businessman says, well, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes when God sees you. Or I wouldn't want to be in your shoes when you go to see God. And he said, but all I did was say the same thing that you said. I feel like its delivery was less impactful. It struck the businessman, like his delivery hit the businessman right, but reading it becomes a little awkward. Essentially, the businessman saying, I've worked as hard as I need to work, my family's taken care of, why should I keep trying? I wouldn't want to be in your shoes when you go to see God. And the whole point of the interaction being that God wants you to do your very best until you run out of best to do. You don't get to a point where you've made it and you get to just quit. You have to continue in the calling that he's gifted you in, wherever you're at. So that example, you've got a high-profile businessman who's made a ton of money. The goal then is to continue growing your business and make more money with the goal of giving to the church, establishing charities, making it work, right? You're not just accumulating wealth for accumulating it. It's to build the kingdom and do things. We live in Babylon, and currency is the lifeblood of Babylon. And God has gifted certain men with a talent for collecting it. And, it's then incumbent on them to use those worldly goods to build the heavenly kingdom. To use the worldly goods for heavenly good. There we go. That's better rhetoric. So, the point that he's making, though, is everybody has some kind of calling on their life to do something. And if you simply look around at what you're already doing and just try to do it better and to your best, that's what you're called to do, because that's where you're at right now. And even if it's only for a short time. And then he gets to grace and skills and abilities, and then he begins talking about now the abilities that God has given you to use those in your calling, in the will of God, more powerfully. But with an ear towards listening to God, right? One of the examples he gives is a coach who's coaching a girls' basketball team. And they haven't won state, and he was really frustrated as a coach. And he's like, we can't do this, and it's frustrating. And he starts praying about it, and he's like, God, help me do this in your strength and not my own. I clearly don't have what it takes. Back to what I was saying, God will quietly allow you to fail until you get frustrated, turn around and ask for help, and realize that's what you should have done the first time. But God will let you figure it out the hard way if you want. It's up to you, buddy. So he immediately gets the impression in his prayer that he should take the 90-minute practice and spend 45 minutes reading the Bible and praying with the girls. Okay. And then 45 minutes of practice instead of 90 minutes straight of practice. They won state 2 years in a row after that, after making that single change. So it's not about just doubling your efforts, work hard, you're going to earn all the monies. But it's about understanding that God has made you really good at things. And he's put you where you're at to use the gifts that he's given you to build his kingdom. But you need to use those gifts in the way that he wants you to use them. And, I forgot, specifically the charisma, the gifts that we're given are abilities above natural ability. There's a contrast he draws with each example, is that it's ability, the gifts that God gives you, you have maybe a natural strength in your own power, but when you operate in God's will, in his calling, using his gifts that he's given you, there's a return that's much greater, and your skill, you'll find, is much greater than even your normal, I do it myself. I tie my shoes myself! When you do things with God's help, in his spirit, in prayer and humility, you'll find the return is much greater. And that's the goal, is the great return of God's word. You know, his word doesn't return void, so he's going to get the job done with or without you. And the goal is just have it be with you and do it. The example I always give for working with God in things is you've got a dad mowing his lawn. I borrowed this because the exact instance happened for someone I went to church with. He gave this as an example, and it's so perfect. But because he was doing this with his kid. But you got a dad with a real lawnmower mowing the lawn, and you got a little kid with a Fisher-Price bubble mower mowing the lawn next to him. And he's like, I'm helping Dad. Yeah, you are, little buddy. And we all know Dad's the one actually getting the yard mowed. And it's the same thing for us in God, right? Where, a preacher will stand up there and give the message. I'm helping God. Yeah, you are, little buddy. Good job, man. You just pushing a Fisher-Price bubble mower. But think about it. If you were inside playing video games, are you helping Dad? No. Are you going to get to sit back with Dad and drink iced tea after the yard's mowed with that sense of satisfaction, covered in sweat? And he's like, good job, little buddy. Are you going to have that moment when you sat inside and played video games the whole time? No. You got to be out there in the heat next to him, pushing that bubble mower, even though you know the grass is still the same length after the bubble mower goes over it. And Dad's got to get the real mower out there to do the real work. That's how it is with God, right? We do our best. There's a refinement of methods and techniques. We hone our own skill as we go on. I take classes to be an electrician better. I try and buy better tools, another drill bit, that kind of thing. I find better ways to do things. But I understand that the fact that electricity as a force of nature even allows lights to come on is by virtue of God who made the heavens and the earth. I'm just borrowing it and moving it around. I can't make lightning. I only bend it to where it makes your vacuum or your garbage disposal turn on. That's all. And it's, even the strength I get, in a very real sense, the strength I get comes from food, which comes from animals that ate plants that grew out of the ground because sunshine, because God makes everything grow. It's awesome. In a very real sense, all of the strength and effort that I'm able to exert is because of God, directly. In addition to, whatever's going on in the heavenlies that we can't understand or comprehend. So we, in our own human power, can find and expand on our gifts, but it's when we're using those gifts to build the kingdom, and when we're relying on God's strength to operate, everything works out way better than we ever could have hoped for. foreman right now, or like junior foreman, but it's not a clearly defined position, but I'm essentially a foreman that another foreman gets to check in on. But anyway, I'm running jobs and organizing work and planning out stages and ordering material. And there's a lot of little details I cannot micromanage. I literally have to trust God that I remember everything important in time to make sure everything gets done on time. And I was actually a little early this last job on accident, which was, that's a thing. But like the fire alarm always has issues in old buildings. There's always a little problem that you never even knew existed. And so throughout my day, like as an example, this last job on the fire alarm, I'm just praying to God as I'm exploring the fire alarm. You got to find out where all the old wires go, and it's got to be a clear, clean circuit, no breaks, with a single resistor at the very end of that circuit that the panel reads, and to make sure the panel has no troubles. Because if there's any issues in that circuit, anything's open, anything's crossed, if the resistor's not in, it'll read as a problem on the panel, and you got to figure that out, because then your fire alarm system doesn't work. It sounds easy. It is easy for new construction, but when you're in a building that has had, it's got an ancient, all the panel schedule, all the approval stickers are from 92 on this panel. It is some old wiring that I'm having to fight with, and it's not always fun, but you're opening the ceiling, and I literally pray to God that there aren't any problems. Or if there are problems, I'm just like, God, help me figure this out, because it could be any one of 35 things, and then I just start looking for, where the problem's at, and I happen to find it more often than not. This last job, no problems. I did a little exploring. The one circuit I needed was rolled up in the ceiling already from like an old installation they had pulled out. I dragged the wire over to where I needed it. All the other stuff I wired up to come back to that wire and tie the old wire to the new wire I had put in, and boom, NAC 4 was up and running. And it's awesome. It's a notification alarm circuit. It's for all the things that flash and squawk when the fire alarm goes off. They're called NAC circuits. Most panels will have 1 to 4, to have up to 4 circuits on them, sometimes more, depending on the panels. Anyway, that's what, just so you know what that is. So yeah, NAC 4 was up and running. We're good to go, off to the races. God is good. And along the way, like to my coworkers and stuff, I'm just like, thank Jesus that worked out. When it's a close call or something was broken, but it was an easy fix to make it not broken. Or if something gets stuck or we're having a hard time doing something, I'm constantly bringing God's name and making it clear that that's the one I'm relying on. I'm like, yes, Jesus is blue collar. He cuts us some slack sometimes. Other times God makes you work for it. It's okay to spend an hour and a half trying to fish a wire down a wall that should be a 20-minute job because they're like 4 cross studs. That's just life sometimes, but it makes you stronger, better, able to solve problems better, to have to work and struggle and fight for things. We've got some babies right now. Especially when they start crawling, we just let them crawl. When they're trying to get a toy, they'll be crawling around doing tummy time. I don't move the toy closer to them. I make them crawl and get it because it makes them stronger. It teaches them to crawl better. So God does the same thing with us. He's not always going to cut you slack on all the little details, but He's there. On the days, there have been days where things weren't working out, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to get a job done on time. And, just praying my brains out and keep working and keep moving the whole time. And then next thing I know, I lift my head up and I go, oh, that was the last thing to do, wasn't it? Yeah. Oh, I guess I'm done here, huh? Yep. Okay. All right. Well, we'll come back Monday when the part's in or whatever. So yeah, it's awesome. But the whole point of the book is that you should have, when you're doing things God's way, inside of God's calling for your life, there should then be a multiplied return on that effort, on that investment. So it's cool, man. I like where it's going so far. Definitely, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, pre-order. I forget. I think his website's just johnbevere.com. It's pretty cool. He managed to nab up John Bevere as like his, on Twitter, he's at John Bevere. It's rare to get your first and last name on social media platforms. And I think he's got it across the board as just John Bevere. Bevere, and then John is John, not short for Jonathan. It's John, John. So yeah, John Bevere. Now if you go to johnbevere.com, I think his Messenger International is the name of his publishing company ministry that he runs. Oh, nope. What is it? Yeah, Messenger International, which is another thing you can Google and try and find him. But yeah, that's cool. Every day I'm going to go through in a couple more chapters as I read them at night. And the book comes out November 17th, but it's on pre-order now. I don't know if they're still doing the launch team deal. But yeah, get to it. Multiplication cards are hilarious. I'm going through one of those. I have nothing but respect for the dad joke, for the multiplication cards. I still have it here. Because it's X multiply, and I think the first card on the deck says, these cards are meant to be dealt, not kept on your own. And it was something inspiring or whatever, but they're multiplication cards. That's hilarious. That is a perfect dad joke. I have a lot of respect for that amount of effort that goes into a pun. I mean, these are just like little, calendar affirmation kind of things. But the fact that he took the time to make these real cards, he mentions them briefly when he was doing the presentation. And I don't know if he could tell it was short on time and he's trying to wrap up, or if he's not really excited about them, but an intern said, hey, and he's like, yeah, sure, why not? I don't know which it is, if he just didn't have time, or, it's some intern's idea and he's like, we'll try it, we'll see. He's just not really excited about them. But the fact that you would take the time to make something this nice, that is literally just a real world pun, is amazing to me. And I respect that level of dad joke. It's pretty great. So yeah, I've got a book myself coming out whenever the cover guy finally finished the cover. So whenever that's done, I gotta make like a landing page for it. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just an electrician figuring it out without any help or supervision. Guys, never leave your local electrician unsupervised. They're not... Bible college dropout electricians should not be left alone and unsupervised. Mine doesn't have these cool little cards. I do have a thing called man cards. Mine have 52 cards, but mine are actually a deck of playing cards. Take that. They're not a pun, though. Multiplication cards. I would have put problems on the back, or on the front. I would have put problems on the front. A random multiplication, like, flashcard on it, too. You gotta swing for the fence. You gotta commit. But yeah, my book is about it's called The Blue Collar Blind Spot, because the evangelical media is inadvertently ignoring blue-collar culture. It functions largely like an American subculture, and I don't think they realize that. You're accidentally alienating anywhere between 1/3 to 50% of your potential audience by not communicating in blue-collar language, acknowledging blue-collar culture, and you're just missing it. The examples in the book are, for me, unrelatable. I don't really know any businessmen. I don't really play golf. That's a rich people sport. I don't know, man. I mean, there's a lot of blue-collar guys that you accidentally alienate by never mentioning somebody who works out of a work truck, somebody who works on a factory, a cop pulling 12-hour shifts overnight, 3 days a week, doing like 2-week swing shifts and stuff. You're accidentally leaving us out, and you're leaving us to have to bridge that gap to the white-collar culture and language. And it's just, I know it's not intentional, but yeah, that's my book, is just kind of pointing that out with, I had nothing but original data points for that book. Some personal experience, and I was having to kind of fabricate original data points because nobody's studying this and nobody's talking about it. That's why I think it's kind of overlooked. It was difficult to get church statistics from Pew Research that you could also correlate with blue collar industries. It was hard to get any kind of overlap or cross reference there. I did the best I could, and I wasn't smart enough to put any graphics in that chapter. I'm gonna have to need a second edition in like a year anyway. All of my statistics are from pre-corona baloney. So, and it takes like a year to get any meaningful statistics out, processed, and then in a way that a random guy can access it without paying $1,000 a year. Gallup, I'm looking at you. So yeah, if you want access to any of that data, you usually have to have like an institution subscribe to it or something. Or be like a member of a university that has a subscription or something. It's terrible. So yeah, but anyway, that's the book that I wrote, and there's a chapter in there dedicated to the fact that work is important. In fact, I would argue it is the purpose, it's our purpose in life. That sounds myopic, but hear me out, listen, right? The word to implies purpose. Or direction, right? I drove to the grocery store. I went to the grocery store to get milk, for the purpose of getting milk, right? So when God in Genesis 2:15 put man in the garden to work and protect it, that at that moment man's purpose in life is to work and protect. And then woman is created as a helper for man. So now obviously our purpose is much grander than that, we understand in the full unfolding of the Bible, but as a baseline, you will more readily find God's will in life when you are not afraid of hard work and you protect those that you love. And you protect your family and your culture. Like it's an all, right? Look at any action movie, right? It's a hardworking guy who has to protect the innocent for the duration of the film, right? And then they get into like gory indulgence nonsense, violent indulgence. But that's Hollywood. You can't take the sin out of Hollywood. It wouldn't be Hollywood anymore. That comes with the territory. Anyway, yeah, that's the whole point of my book, though, is to draw out just that little nuance that, in general, the concept of work is not being addressed properly in the church, and this is negatively affecting blue-collar parishioners. And the main thrust is that blue-collar is effectively an unreached people group. So it's the blue-collar blind spot, because it's not malicious, it's not on purpose, like, oh, those dirty people that work with their hands for a living. But, like, words matter, right? And so when you say, go to college and get a good job, any pastor would be like, well, yeah, okay. So the only good jobs are on the other side of college. That's what you're saying. Now, the way English works, that means that bad jobs don't require college. So a plumber who didn't have to go to college is a bad job. A lawyer who went to college is a good job. As a Christian, good and bad are not determined by our lifetime earning potential. It's not. And you just ask that lawyer how valuable a good plumber is when his toilet's overflowing in his house. At the same time, right? Ask that plumber how valuable a lawyer is when he's facing multiple convictions, or somebody's trying to take his kids. Both jobs are necessary and important after their own way. But that's what needs to be observed, though, is that all jobs are equally important. Yes, society wouldn't function without plumbers, or electricians, or HVAC technicians, right? It might function without lawyers. I don't know. But that's what we need to look at. Is you should be okay with your children becoming plumbers. God was okay with his kid becoming a carpenter. That was fine for him. Jesus chose for his dad to be a carpenter. You can argue about, well, you had to be from the line of David, and this specific. A lot of people came from that line of David. Okay, the family trees branch out over time. God could have picked anybody. But he picked a hard-working man and said, that's going to be, Jesus is like, no, I want that dad. And he knows, according to the custom of the time, you pick your dad, you pick your career path. And most scholars agree sometime between the anecdote where Jesus is like 13 and his adulthood, Joseph dies. It seems like he just disappears from the narrative, so they kind of assume he dies. Depending on where he died in that period of time, Jesus was a carpenter for around 20 years, between ages 10 and 30. And depending on when Joseph died, he would have been the one to teach his brother James and Jude how to be carpenters. He would have been there helping anyway, with dad in the shop. That's how my kids have done. I taught my oldest how to ride a bike. And then I taught my second oldest how to ride a bike, and my oldest son helped her. And within a month, all 5 kids are riding bikes. Each one was like, well, I want my training wheels off now, and they all started teaching each other, and they're off to the races. So it's awesome, right? Things are great. Nothing is not great. God is on the throne, and John Bevere's got an awesome book. This is backwards because Facebook doesn't know what they're doing with cameras. X, Multiply Your God-Given Potential. Google it. It'll pop up. JohnBevere.com is his do-it-your. And pre-orders right now. The book comes out November 17th. And, all right. Fare thee well. Godspeed.